If you're an investor, you really have to have a good team around. You have to have a good realtor, you have to have a good attorney, you have to have a good accountant. You know, you have to have a good private lender, you have to have a good team around you, and you have to know what you're doing, work hard and understand it. But I put a lot of credence in the realtors, good realtor that really understands values, you know. If you want to do hard money lending, what your initial question is, you just got to almost kind of think worst case scenario, but you want that borrower to be able to articulate what their exit strategy is.
Welcome everybody, I'm Kamil Sarji, the broker owner of Gold Door Realty, and today I have Glenn with me. Glenn, you want to tell us what you do?
Hi, thank you, Kamil. Thanks for inviting me. My name is Glenn Andreoni. I am an attorney. I've been an attorney for 32 plus years now, going on 33 actually. I have an office in Lincoln, Rhode Island. I'm a Massachusetts attorney, Rhode Island attorney, pretty much with a concentration in real estate matters. I've personally done a lot of land development. I've represented a lot of land developers. I've personally done a lot of private lending. I represent a lot of private lenders. And I also do a lot of tax sales. I represent municipalities in the state of Rhode Island. Probably about almost 3/4 of them in the state of Rhode Island, when they, you know, the municipalities auction off their property for non-payment of delinquent taxes, they hire my company, a subsidiary of my law firm, basically Rhode Island Tax Titles, to conduct their tax sales.
And if you live in Rhode Island and you haven't heard the name Glenn Andreoni, like, I don't know, you're probably not living in Rhode Island, because everybody knows you.
Oh, thank you, Camille. I don't know if that's good or
Popular
bad.
guy.
I like to go under the radar, but I don't know if that's good or bad. But that's probably because of my age, actually. My daughter Brianna Andreoni is an attorney as well. She's been working,
Which is awesome. That's really cool.
Which is awesome. Yep. But thank you for the compliment. I don't know if it's a compliment or it's just an indication of my age and the years I've been doing this for.
So this show is called Just 2 Minutes, and basically for the first 2 minutes I'm going to ask you some random questions.
Sure.
And then after that we will go into the topic for today, which is hard money lending. Very exciting. So I got my timer here. Are you ready for action?
I am.
Okay, ready? 3, 2. All right. So what do you like the most about plants?
Plants. Their color. I like the color of plants. Okay. Interesting question. I like that, Camille.
How do you think Popeye lost his eye?
Probably chasing olive oil. Good answers?
Yeah, I mean, I was just curious what you think, because I don't know. If ants took over a home, right, if you got this investment property and 90% of the home is taken over by ants, what would you do?
Call an exterminator?
Yeah? 90% of them. That's scary.
It's very
Would you dump
scary.
the house? Or just,
No, I'd call an exterminator. Just because there's ants in the house doesn't necessarily mean there's damage in the house, right? Depends what kind of ants.
Yeah, right.
By the way, for the record, he did not ask me these questions or give me these questions before, but keep going, my friend.
Okay. Fishing, salt or fresh?
Salt.
Yeah, you like fishing? Salt water?
My son and I go saltwater fishing. Actually, this past weekend we went saltwater fishing off of a jet ski, our jet skis.
Oh,
It's
cool.
pretty cool, yeah. Didn't catch anything, but
I never thought of doing that.
yeah, it's pretty fun. Yeah, we like it.
What's your most favorite fish to catch?
I like blue. We throw them back in. I feel bad for the fish, actually, believe it or not. But they give a good fight. But I like bluefish. My son likes, bass, sea bass. He likes to keep them and fillet them and eat them. But I feel bad for the fish, so I like to throw them back in.
All right, awesome.
Interesting
What do you
question.
think of that? Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that.
When I say random, it's like...
Yeah, that's random. I didn't hear the word random, but I thought it was going to ask me about real estate questions, but go ahead.
Well, that's easy questions for you. You'd be
I know. Yeah.
while you're sleeping, you're
Well, those are
answering
easy
the questions.
questions. Yeah.
All right, Glenn, that's awesome. Thank you very much for coming here. It's like,
thank
you do a lot of things, but really excited today to talk about hard money lending, because a lot of people don't know what that is. When I say hard money lending, people sometimes envision the guy with the baseball bat
No,
the
those
suit.
yeah, those days are over. Hard money lenders, a lot of hard money lenders, but in some states they call it bridge financing. But basically, it's those days are long gone. It's very similar to institutional or bank lending, or going to Bank America or Citizens. It's the big difference is between hard money lending and we'll call it institutional lending is that the hard money lender, such as myself, either an individual or it could be an LLC or it could be an IRA, it could be, which we'll discuss at some point, it could be a number, or it could be an institution or a family trust, or a wealthy family that wants to put out their money. It could be an individual that raises money from other people and it's registered with the SEC. So there's different hard money lenders.
So it could be personal. It could be someone could set up a corporation and have that money in there.
Generally, like I have limited liability companies that do hard money lending that I do hard money lending through. But there's all different avenues to set up hard money lending. It's a good investment. Like for myself, who understands real estate, been involved in real estate. I've been actually doing hard money lending for I think 30 years, maybe probably 31 years now. I think my first or second year out of law school, I had a client that was a builder, a good friend of mine, and he wanted me to invest in it. And he said, why don't you give me a loan? I gave him a small loan, and it kind of took off from there, basically. Now I do a lot of it. I enjoy it. It's all legit. If somebody doesn't pay, we foreclose, we don't break legs. A lot of people think that, but it's not the case. We have the borrower, just like an institutional lender, sign a promissory note, which is a promise to pay, $100,000 back at whatever the interest rate is.
What's the going rate usually for?
So the
hard money
rates
lending?
range between 10 to I've seen 20%. There's also points that most hard money lenders charge, and those points are 0 to 10 points. A point is a percentage of the loan. So 1 point on a $100,000 loan is $1,000. 5 points on a $100,000 loan is $5,000. Most hard money or bridge lenders will charge the points up front. So if, let's hypothetically say you're giving a $100,000 loan and you're charging 2 points, well, the closing attorney is going to get funded possibly 100,000, but they'll get 2,000 back, or they'll possibly just fund 98,000.
Yeah, because
of that.
obviously
But
they don't need to bring the 2,000.
Right. Ultimately, the borrower at the closing is getting 98,000.
Okay.
The loan amount less the points. And then the interest rate, generally speaking, most hard money lenders calculate interest based, like interest only payments. So hypothetically, again, 100,000, 12% would be $1,000 a month.
Okay.
In interest.
Because you take the 12 months divided by.
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
Yep. You take the loan amount times 12% divided by 12, basically.
For 12
if
months,
it's
okay.
12%, if it's 10%, if it's 15%, whatever.
So I just want to go back to the range you were saying. What could cause a hard money lender to say they're going to give 10% versus 20%?
So we
how
look,
do you know?
like I like to look at, and I have some notes here. I like to look at the property itself. When I'm vetting a hard money loan, I like to look at a number of items. Like I like to look at the borrower, right? But I don't generally pull their credit. I don't really care what their credit is.
Okay.
I want to see.
Before you go see it, do you come up with the percentage, or is it after you see it?
No, it's generally after, unless it's one of my longtime clients or borrowers that I know, that I trust, that I know they know what they're doing. I know when they buy property, it's a good deal. But I get a lot of newbies, we call them, new borrowers, that I don't know if they're getting a good deal on the property. So they could be overpaying for the property, and this market's kind of difficult to tell. So if that's the case, I generally, want, it depends, it ranges, maybe 20 to 30% down. Most hard money lenders want a good chunk of change down, right? We don't necessarily, we can close quickly. So basically the difference between hard money lenders and institutional financing is we don't care about credit for the borrower.
Yeah.
Short term, you're almost better off going with a hard money lender. So a lot of my borrowers, let's say hypothetically, they take a loan out with me and it's going to cost them $10,000, right? After they pay interest and points, okay? And it's a $100,000 loan, and it's a $200,000 purchase. I would say make a cash offer of, let's say they're asking $200,000. I would say make a cash offer and deduct whatever you're going to pay me, and you'll generally, as a buyer, get the property. generally speaking, you'll beat out a person that's going for institutional financing with less of a purchase price, believe it or not. So if you say if the property's listed, no property's 200,000, so it's a bad example, but let's just say 200,000, and it's going to cost you 10,000 to borrow from me. Offer 190 cash. And when we say cash, it's hard money, basically.
Yeah.
I like to vet it before. I don't want to tell a borrower that I'll give you $100,000 without vetting it.
Looking at it. Yeah.
Looking at it, you know.
So it depends. So you're saying the interest depends on
Yeah,
how it looks
Yep.
and the money down that the value versus how much the cost to repair and
Yeah, so there's all different types of loans that I can give. There's new construction, so a builder or borrower comes to me and they own a lot or they're going to buy a lot and they want to build a house, a 2,000 square foot house. So I'll give, Camille comes to me and owns a lot in Providence and wants to build a, 2,000 square foot house. It's going to cost them, I don't know, 250,000, right? And you already own a lot. I'll give you a construction loan for that 250 and give it to you in disbursements. I'll say, okay, what are you going to do? And you're going to say, well, first I'm going to put the foundation in, and then I'm going to frame it and roof it and put the windows in, and so I'll give you disbursements based on that.
it's like prove that you did the foundation. Show me
Exactly.
proof that you paid for the foundation
Yeah.
so I can pay you.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, oh no, I'll go down and check it. I'll send
Okay.
somebody down. Yeah, no. We do. I mean, again, they can send me pictures. Most of the borrowers are decent, hard-working people, and it's not worth them to go to Bank of America or Citizens and get tortured. And first of all, a lot of these lending institutions, traditional lending institutions, won't give a loan, a construction loan on spec houses. If it's your own house that you're building for yourself, they'll probably give you a loan. But if it's a spec house, it's really hard to get a loan. So a lot of these builders need financing, quite frankly. And that's why I come in. So, and also there's a rehab. Camille buys this property, needs to rehab it, needs money to rehab it. It's tough to get a loan. So a lot of people go for private financing there, and then you give them a certain percentage of the purchase price to buy it, and then you give, based on what type of work Camille wants to do to his property, you give him a percentage of the work. If you need $100,000, maybe I'll give you 100% of that, $100,000 as the work goes on, or maybe $80,000 of the $100,000 work.
Okay.
So that's kind of the second type of loan. And then there's the flip loan, where Camille's buying, I'm using you as an example, Camille's buying a property and basically wants to flip it, looks at it, getting a really good deal, knows the seller, getting a good deal, discloses to the seller or signs the contract, but needs to close on it and needs to basically flip it. There's those type of loans as well. There's all different type of loans. The loans we don't do is owner-occupied. I don't do any owner-occupied loans, primary residence. It's all commercial. And there's also, somebody wants to buy a restaurant, and they're running a restaurant. But we don't give business loans, but we'll give the loan on the real estate.
Okay, so let's take a few steps back. Okay, so let's say I have $500,000 cash that I inherited, and it's sitting in my bank account. And I come to you and I'm like, Glenn, I want to be a hard money lender. How does someone become a hard money lender?
Well, you got to be careful. You really have to understand values of real estate. I mean, it's not that difficult, but you just have to know. I think if somebody that's kind of just walking into it, first of all, it's a good investment because with the stock market, who knows, especially there was a crash just recently yesterday, right?
Yeah.
The stock market goes up and down. You're not going to make as much as a hard money lender as you will in the stock market in a day. So it's a small, relatively small growth, but I shouldn't say small, it's a good growth, but it's a longer process. It takes years and years to really make decent money, and it takes a lot of money to put out there. But you can get a good return, $500,000. Just that 10% alone is $50,000, right? Plus 2 points, another 10,000. That's 60,000.
And then at the end of it, you get your money back.
And at the end of it, and if you don't, you have to foreclose.
Yeah.
I mean,
we're going to go through the foreclosure part.
Yeah.
Excited to talk about that too. So, but that person that comes to you, how do you, as far as paperwork, what do you...
Yeah, so what I would say, if Camille came to me and said, Glenn, I just inherited $500,000, first I'd say congratulations. Sorry for your loss, whoever you inherited it. from, but congratulations with the inheritance. Then I would say, do you have a borrower already? Yes, my cousin or a client of mine or a friend of mine is buying a 3-family in Pawtucket for $320,000. I'd say, okay, well, how much are they putting down? I don't know. I got to ask them. Okay, you ask them. How much you think, Glenn? I don't know. It depends. Is the property worth $320? Is it worth $290 and they're overpaying for it? Or is the property really worth $380 and they're underpaying? So that kind of
So you kind of like advise them on like what are they going to do with this money and protect them.
Right, and I'm not a realtor. I don't really know values per se. So what I do is I would say, Kamil, you have $500,000 and you have your friend who wants to borrow $320,000 or they're buying $320,000. Why don't you hire a realtor? Kamil happens to be a great realtor.
Hire myself.
Yeah, hire yourself. Go look at the property. And worst case scenario, what do you think the property at a fire sale? Because the worst case scenario, you're going to have to foreclose on this person and sell the property, and that's going to cost you money. You're going to have to continue to pay the taxes on the property, or else there'll be a tax sale, as I said earlier. We do tax sales too. You're going to have to continue to pay the insurance. This is if your borrower, your cousin, hit some financial troubles and can't pay you or whatever, or discovered that there's a crack beam and the whole foundation has to be,
So I have to walk
redone.
into this house and imagine, like, would I buy this house?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally, not only as an attorney, but as an investor and as an attorney who represent a lot of investors, that you have to really think worst case scenario. You could trust, but you need to verify. You need to trust this person, and I'm sure they have good intent, but anything can happen. The economy can turn. That person can pay $320. It's been coming up, but it can turn. I've been through 3 cycles so far, by the way, doing it for, as I said earlier, 30 plus years. I've seen cycles, and I've only foreclosed on one person, doing it. So I try to get a good amount of money down. So if the market starts to turn, I still have equity, and that person doesn't, For instance, the last economy when we had a crash, I had quite a few loans out there, and I told all my borrowers, the market's coming down, you need to sell. Like, you need to sell or refinance, get me paid off. And they were upset at the time. A lot of them, they felt like, I could have got $60,000. Now the market came down. I'm only going to get 40. Let's wait till it goes back up. I said, nope, I'm not waiting. But in retrospect now, those borrowers are so happy, those sellers, because they would have lost their shirt, because a year later, they would have lost $40,000. So granted, they would have made $60,000 had they sold it in a peak, but the market started to come down. I politely said, you got to sell it. We're losing equity in the property. They sold it. They pocketed $40,000.
Yeah.
But they listened to themselves, and had I not forced them, I can't force anybody, but I suggested that they sell it. Had they not done that, they would have held on to it for another 6-7 months or even a year, and they would have lost money. Yeah. So all those borrowers that were upset at me back at the last churn, right, when the market came back to me and said, Glenn, thank God you told me to do that, because, we would have lost our shirt on the property.
So not only are you their attorney, you're also their consultant.
Yeah, I try to do that. That's a perspective that I've always tried to give as an attorney. The attorneys are a dime a dozen. I'm not knocking attorneys. It's hard to become an attorney, but it's hard to find an attorney that'll give a business perspective, And not that I'm any smarter, by any means I'm not. I've just kind of seen a lot of clients, and I've done a lot of investing myself, so I see the mistakes my clients have made and myself I've personally made. So I try to protect my clients, and like, if you come to me again to do some private hard money lending, I'm going to treat you as if I'm doing the hard money lending and tell you exactly what I do. Same with the documents, the documentation. Like, I'll say, okay, I'll be your attorney. I'm going to guide you. So I'm going to say, Kamil, you need to go and get yourself a CMA on the property. Okay? And if the property's $320, I would suggest you talk to the borrower. Let's call them together, Kamil. We get your cousin on the phone, and I say, okay, John, what do you plan on doing with the property? I'm going to spend $40,000. Okay, do you have the 40? Yes. Let me see the 40. I want to make sure you have it in the bank, to make sure you have the money to rehab it. So all of a sudden, Kamil gives this guy a loan, and the person doesn't have the money. We have a problem that is stuck. They can't hire people to do it, and now what do you do?
Right.
So what I would suggest in that case, if they say, I only have $40,000, I'd say, okay, great. and it's going to take 40, and they say to you, Camille, you give me the 320 100%, and I'll do the rehab 100%. And Camille thinks, that's good. I say, no, that's not good. I want you, John, to give my client, your cousin Camille, the $40,000 at the closing. Then Camille, as you do the work, will give you the 40 back. So what that does, Camille, is that now gives you some equity in the property. So the person bought it at 320. At the closing, you gave him 280, or her 280, right? And now, God forbid something goes wrong, you have $40,000 cushion, and you're holding that money in escrow. If they just stop paying, or God forbid they pass away, or something happens, you now have a $40,000 cushion to either complete the rehab or just sell it.
Yeah. So it's kind of like a casino, you know? They have a better chance of winning versus the person gambling.
Well, they being the private lender? Or
They being the buyer.
Buyer. Yeah.
Or the person borrowing.
Yeah, I mean...
You have the better, like you're protecting yourself and you have more equity. Like your chances of recovering is better. If you play your cards right and you do the numbers.
Yeah, well, for starters, you have to get a Camille to represent you as his realtor and do a good job and do some due diligence and say, okay, you're buying this for $320, great deal. You're going to put $40,000 into it. You're going to be into it for $380. I think we can get $500 for it. $120,000. After you pay realtor's commission, interest, everything else, you're going to make $90,000 or whatever you're going to make.
Okay.
That's a good deal, right? Or Camille might say, well, now, by the way, I have you as a realtor, not as a lender. Camille might look at it and say, you're buying it for $320, you put 40 into it, you're into it $380, you can only get $420. So that sounds good, it's $40,000 profit, but you have to pay me as a realtor, you have to pay Glenn Andreoni as a hard money lender, you have to pay the real estate taxes, the holding costs.
And the number is so close like that is risky.
Right.
Like 40,000, probably not a good...
So really, if you're an investor, and I know we're talking private lending, but if you're an investor, you really have to have a good team around. You have to have a good realtor, you have to have a good attorney, you have to have a good accountant. You know, you have to have a good private lender, you have to have a good team around you, and you have to know what you're doing, work hard and understand it. But I put a lot of credence in the realtors, good realtor that really understands values, you know. If you want to do hard money lending, what your initial question is, you just got to almost kind of think worst case scenario, but you want that borrower to be able to articulate what their exit strategy is. Maybe they're going to hold the property and refinance. And if they say that, I want to say, okay, are you pre-approved? Yes, I am. Who's your loan officer? It's John Smith. Okay, can I have John's number? Yes. Call John up. John, is Camille's cousin pre-approved on this loan for how much? And is it like 100% go? Or yes, they just have to submit their 2024 taxes or whatever. They're self-employed. So I want to get a feel for the exit strategy of refinancing and how clean that is. You know, if all of a sudden I call the loan officer, John Smith, and John Smith says, they didn't apply yet, I have no idea, I haven't pulled their credit. Well, then I'll call your cousin back, you know, and say, hey, you haven't even applied. I called your loan officer. Like, they don't even have your credit scores.
Yeah.
Generally, I, as a private lender, don't necessarily care about your credit scores. I just want to see you have money to put down, you have a game plan, and you have a clean exit strategy. So the only time that credit score, some private lenders do require credit scores. If I'm doing a large loan, then I'll require that.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, if the only time the credit score kicks in is if that person's exit strategy is to refinance, and I call the loan officer to make sure that they can refinance, and the loan officer needs to know what their credit scores and income are. Other than that, I, as a private lender, don't really care what your credit scores are. I mean, if you're in bankruptcy, obviously, you shouldn't be buying property, but if you have low credit scores and half-decent income, I don't really care. I just want to know that you have money to put down, you're a hard worker, and you have a good exit strategy. So that's what I would do for you if you came to me because you inherited $500,000. I would say, take these steps to ensure that you're going to get paid. Then as far as the legal end of it, you know, we're going to do just like when we do a closing for Navigant Credit Union or Milford Federal Credit Union or Citizens Bank or Bank of America. We're going to do a title examination on the property to make sure the seller owns it. We're going to do a closing, get the funds. We're going to pay off all the liens, give you a clean title policy. You, Camille.
You're doing the closing because you already did the title.
Yeah, generally. Yeah, well, if you, now this is a scenario where you, Camille, came you're a lender, you're coming to me saying, Glenn, I got $500,000. I want to do, my cousin wants a loan. Can you handle it? So I'm going to say first vet it, go through those steps that I just articulated, get a good, well, you are a realtor obviously, but get somebody, even get an independent person to go look at it. Get somebody in your office, if you're coming to me, to go look at it, give you analysis, try to get some money down from the borrower, get a clean exit strategy. Are they flipping it or are they holding it? You know?
How long is usually like a hard money lender
So
for?
you know, some take. I've done them in a day, like on a flip deal. That's kind of rare, but usually, 6 months to a year.
Okay.
You know.
What happens if they go over that?
So that's when I assess the situation and see if I feel that the market's starting to come down, therefore my equity's starting to come down for the $40,000 they put down, is that now shrinking? So the property that they bought for $320 that I have a mortgage for $280 on, is that property now worth $300? So my equity now is shrinking. It's only $20,000. So that's when I articulated earlier that I would, when the market crashed, I was telling my borrowers, you need to pay me off, either refinance or sell it quickly, because I saw that market coming down. That's why I do short term. That's why I don't do, I've had clients that would do like 15-year notes. I'm like, you're crazy, because you don't know what the market's gonna, and they didn't realize that. I said, do it 1 year, and if the market sustains itself like it has been for quite a few years
15
now.
years?
Yeah, crazy.
That's just...
They didn't know. Yeah.
It's just interest only. Right?
No, usually if it's 15 years, they're doing principal and interest amortized over 30 years or 15 years.
Wow, that would be...
Yeah, but I've had like other clients that have gone to other attorneys that the attorney they came to them and said, I want a 15-year, I'm selling my property, I'm going to hold a note. It's a 3-family in Woonsocket, I'm going to hold a note for 15 years. Because that's what they want. And
interest rates higher.
And they went to another attorney, and the attorney did all that. And I say to them, but if somebody comes to me and they're selling a 3-family and they want to hold a note, I say, well, first of all, make sure it's not owner occupied. Secondly, don't do a 15-year. Do a year with a balloon. Do a 15-year amortization with a year balloon. So every year you can assess the situation and see, if the market's coming down and you're losing the equity, because today's market, you might get $500,000 for a 3-family, and tomorrow's market it might only be worth $300,000, or it might be worth $700,000. Who knows? But at least you as a lender can call the shots, as opposed to now the borrower's got a 15-year note, they call the shots. If the market, when people are upside down, years ago I did quite a few short sales. I had I think 15 people working for me just doing short sales.
Wow.
Yeah, we had a pretty big short sale, relatively big. It's Rhode Island standards, relatively big, short sale practice in my office representing sellers. And, when the market turns, people just feel uncomfortable because they don't have equity and they just stop paying the mortgage or whatever. They get laid off or for whatever reason, when the market turns, there's a lot more foreclosures and a lot more short sales. So as a private lender, you got to hedge those by shrinking the length of the term, and you as the private lender should be in charge of whether or not you're going to extend that or not. I've extended mine. I have notes that are going years and years because the people pay great. There's plenty of equity. I like the people. I mean, there's no problem. I tell them.
It's a no-brainer.
I tell them, listen, my rates are higher. You should go to institutional and get lower, although they're not much higher today. Bank rates are relatively high too. So, I tell my clients, go to institutional bank, refinance, and you should try to get a lower rate, and it'll, save you money.
Yeah. So why not loan to owner-occupied?
So owner-occupied, if you lend to owner-occupied, there's all different rules and regulations, RESPA rules, TRID laws, Frank Dodd, the Dodd bill, just different disclosures and different rules and regulations that these lending institutions like Bank of America, they have, Wells Fargo, they have 5,000 people that make sure you're in compliance with all the federal rules and regulations.
Sounds like it's risky giving it to home to owner occupied.
You shouldn't, yeah.
Right.
When a client comes to me, a hard money client, and wants to give a loan to owner occupied, I just say, listen, I don't want to be involved in it. I don't think you should do that because you have to comply with the rules and regulations that the federal government. I can't assure that you'll be in compliance with that. I'm not a regulatory attorney here. I don't know. This, like now, you have to give the CD, closing disclosure, it used to be called settlement sheet, 3 days in advance. Yeah. Well, primary residents, you have to do that. A refinance 3 days in advance. You got a 3-day right to cancel. So it's all these little rules. You have to give the API, you can't change it. You got to give a truth in lending. It's regulated by the federal government. Rightfully so, by the way. It's owner occupied, as opposed to commercial, a person that has no intent to occupy it and they're flipping it. It's for business purposes.
So would you suggest, if I wanted to do the hard money lending, would you suggest it be under my name or putting it under some?
No, I mean, if you do one a year, there's no harm in putting it in your name. You could certainly consult with your accountant because it's income to you. It's interest income that you have to claim. You have to pay federal income taxes on it. You have to pay state income taxes. It's just like interest that you earn in a bank. If the 500,000 sitting in the bank and you're getting 3% from a bank, right? What's that? 15,000, right? Yeah.
If it was in the bank, I'd probably get $10 a year.
Well, today the rate's a little bit higher. 10% would be 15,000, right? So that's interest income to you, right? Just like when you lend your money out, it's interest income. You have to claim that federal, on your taxes. So I always say consult with your accountant relative to whether or not you should form an LLC. But if you're doing one a year,
as far as protecting yourself, does it make sense?
well, if it's some people do it for, to be anonymous because they don't want their name. I have LLCs. I don't want my name plastered all over the registries that Glenn Andreoni's giving loans, So some people want that. But if you're doing a few, I don't think there's no need to unless your accountant suggests it. But if you're doing a couple a year, then I would suggest doing a limited liability company or corporation, setting it up for that purpose. And so it's got tax implications and anonymity if you're doing an LLC. Besides the fact that, you could get sued in certain situations where you're a lender. For instance, you give a loan on a mill in Providence and they find out it's contaminated. So you as a lender, could potentially be liable for the cleanup. And if it's an LLC, you're going to be a little more protected than if you did it individually. A lot more protected, actually.
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing.
Brownfield, yeah.
But even with that, like going with a hard money lender versus financial institution for a commercial loan, they want to make sure there's no contamination. They do the survey but with hard money lender, it's...
Well, I will, if I have somebody come to me on a gas station or mechanic shop, I'll 100% say I want a phase 1 environmental. I want a clean environmental.
Yeah.
Or something that, was an old mill, a factory that I have reasons to believe could be contaminated, then even as most hard money lenders, if you know what you're doing, will require that, to protect themselves because you don't want to be liable for that cleanup.
Yeah. You have to, right, you're going to have to pay for cleanup. You're like, I just bought this place. I didn't even know, but too bad.
Yeah. I just recently gave a hard money loan to a property in Massachusetts. I don't want to say the address of the people, but we found out at the last minute that everybody in the town knew that this property was contaminated at one point. I guess the owners were using it as to sell oil or something, and the oil leaked, and it was a mess, except my buyer and we didn't know. We kind of found out, my buyer found out when he went to get insurance on the property, and his insurance agent, so we would have had no idea. Why would we? It's a single family house. Why would we even think there's an environment? There was no indicia of evidence making us to believe that there'd be an environmental problem. My client went to get insurance. His insurance agent said, that property's an environmental mess. You can't buy that. And he's like, what are you talking about? So he went to another agent, so for an apparent, I don't know why, but they red flagged that property. So at that point, we went back to the seller, who's a municipality, and we basically asked them what was going on. Why didn't you disclose it? And their position was, well, we cleaned it up. It's no longer a problem. So make a long story short, I told my buyer, I'm not giving a loan on that until we really look into this. And I'm not an environmental attorney.
Yeah.
I'm not an environmentalist. So you need to hire an environmentalist. I referred somebody.
Yeah.
He did a great job. He looked at all the reports and said, no, it's cleaned up. You're fine. You're good to go. We submitted that report to the insurance. Insurance said, no problem. We'll insure it. Perfect. Fine.
Jeez.
It's just, it's not easy being a hard money lender, but
Yeah.
if you want to be successful in life, is it easy being a broker? Is it easy being a realtor? Is it easy being an investor? It's not easy being an attorney. Everything's work and due diligence and, You know, you got to think things out and dot your I's and cross your T's. I think no matter what profession you're in.
Can you tell me a moment where you went to check out a home or a property and it was like bad situation? You had to get out of there. Did that ever happen to you?
It just recently, so I generally don't, I'm so busy now running my practice and tax sales and lending. I generally don't look at the property. I send people out. You know, I tell the borrower, you got to hire this person. They'll go out and they'll give me a CMA. So I did send somebody out just about a month ago. They went to a property in Providence to go look at it. And unbeknownst to them, there were squatters in there that were, you know, unfortunately, it's a sad situation, but there were squatters that had one particular squatter had a needle in his arm.
Oh.
Yeah, my poor person, it was a dainty, you know, female, was scared to death. She said she ran out of there. She was just scared because they were like, what the F are you doing here? And they kind of got aggressive with her. So that was a scary situation. And she was like shaking. Glenn, I can never do that. Like, you can't. I said I had no idea that people were living there. You know, how do we know? You know, nobody knew that. Again, there were squatters illegally living there. It's one thing to have squatters, and it's another thing to have squatters that are shooting heroin or whatever they shoot up into their arms. I don't even know. I'm not into drugs, so I don't know what they were shooting up.
Yeah.
But it's
movies,
a whole,
in movies, that's what they're doing.
Yeah, and it's a whole other thing to have this person basically threaten my person that's giving me the CMA. Like, what are you doing here? Start yelling at her, you know. So it's a scary situation. You know, but so I kind of learned, but so that just happened literally a month ago, probably less than a month ago, but it just happens.
They do? They got the cops in there, get them out?
Yeah, so we told the seller that there's people living there. We're not touching this property until, you know, you take care of it. So
what do they do? Throw a smoke bomb in there?
Yeah, I don't know what they did. I didn't get involved in that part. I don't know. The police went in and removed the squatters. I don't exactly know.
Wow.
I have no idea. But I know they get out. That's all I do know. So it's scary, you know. But that's relatively rare. You know, usually when a seller selling property, you know, unless you're dealing with like a foreclosed property, which a lot of people use hard money lenders if you go to a foreclosure and you buy the property because you have to close within 30 days, right? So if you go to a foreclosure, right, the bank's doing a foreclosure, it's right at the property and you buy the property, right? And you have 30 days to close. It's going to be very difficult for you to go to a lending institution and get a loan within 30 days. You know, first of all, that lender's going to require an appraisal. You can't get in the property because it's a foreclosed property. There might be tenants in there.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard. So there's a big demand for private lenders.
Yeah. Okay, so we get the home. What happens now if someone is late on payments to pay you?
So what happens, Kamil, is I generally, you know, say, listen, you're a month or two behind. You got to get caught up. And most of my people do, you know, or they're in the process of refinancing or selling the property. I work with them, but I don't want them to be late anymore. I mean, years ago, when I kind of first started doing it, I wasn't getting monthly payments. I would just let it accumulate on slips. But I just don't like that anymore because you're eating up all the equity too. At least with the monthly payments, I'm sustaining that income and I'm keeping the equity in check. It's not shrinking every month in the sense that I'm losing money, you know? So, but generally speaking, it's just like a regular bank. I don't send notices out. I generally, because I know most of my borrowers, you know, on a personal level, and, you know, we generally just call them and they, you know, oh, I'm out of the country, oh, I mailed it or whatever, and we get the payment usually. I generally don't have a problem.
Okay, so now at what point does it get serious?
It gets serious when they avoid me, when there's no communication. You know, I just think that's the worst thing in the world. Just when you don't. So it's like me as a lawyer, right? If I have a problem, something went wrong with a file, the worst thing, and a client calls me, the worst thing for me to do is to just avoid the client or avoid the problem. As a realtor, if you have a problem, we all get problems. We all make mistakes. If you have a client that, I don't know, something happened, the client's upset, if you avoid the client, it's going to make it worse, in my opinion. So I like to attack it right away. I like to, you know, if a person's not communicating with me, something's wrong. You know, unless they're sick or they have, some good legitimate excuse as to why they stopped communicating. I just don't understand that because I always, again, take the philosophy that communication's the key. If, again, I try to communicate. If I just avoid my client, I can be disbarred for that. They can file a complaint against me as a lawyer.
Yeah.
But that's not the reason why I communicate. It's just I get nervous if I get 2 or 3 calls that I didn't get to. It's now 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. It actually bothers me. I stay up thinking, should I call him? Should I not call him?
Integrity.
Yeah, and I might send him an email saying, hey, I got your message, but it's too late now. I'll call you tomorrow morning. Or call me tomorrow morning. Or I might send him a text. So that if it's a person I know, I will call them at 10 o'clock. I made a call last night at 10:15 to a client because I know they stay up late, So that's critical. So if a borrower is just avoiding the problem, that's not good. Then you got to take legal action, meaning you got to start the foreclosure process. Again, just like Bank of America, Citizens, Navigant, Milford Federal, all the lending institutions.
What is the process to foreclose?
So it's pretty extensive. I have an attorney in my office that does foreclosures, actually. I'll refer it out to him, and so do a lot of my clients. And, first is notice, notice that you're in default pursuant to the mortgage covenants. Then comes advertising, basically. Right? Then you got to start advertising. That gets really expensive, possibly in a Providence Journal, depending on where the property is. And then basically you have a foreclosure right at the curb. So it's, probably a 3-month process, all in all, 2 to 3 months.
Foreclosure at the curb, like...
Meaning there's an auction.
Anybody can buy it for whatever price.
It's all advertising. There's an auctioneer.
You can't take it over yourself?
No, you can't not without a legal foreclosure. No, you got to go through all the statutory requirements.
So I have to bid on this house that I lent money to?
No. There's a bidding process, and you don't have to accept the bids, but generally there's a bid, and you're owed $200,000, and somebody, if you have enough equity and you played your cards right, somebody bids the $200 and you get paid off. They have 30 days to close, as I said. That person's probably going to get hard money,
okay.
And you have 30 days and you get paid off.
So, Glenn, I'm going to ask you,
Fortunately, I've only done it one time. As I said earlier, I've only had to do it one time in my loans.
Wow.
Very conservative. Yeah, I'm very conservative. I work with my people, and I try to get them out of the deals,
Okay, that was my question, is what percentage?
I know some hard money lenders, they foreclose 10 times a year, and I think I do more loans than them. But I have some, what I consider good, solid borrowers. I vet them pretty good. I think I have a good process. It's not that I'm any smarter. I'm just probably more nervous than most people. I work so hard, for my money. I don't want to lose it, because it's my money. Whereas I think some of the hard money lenders, it's not their money. They take other people's money and they pool it together.
Yeah.
So you'll take more of a risk to get that money out there, as opposed to your own hard-earned money. You're nervous,
So out of the deals for all these hard money lenders, what percentage end up in foreclosure?
Again, I think it depends who the hard money lender is. My percentage is extremely low.
Not for you personally, for people that you've done.
I don't necessarily think it depends on the borrower as much as the economy. We've had a good economy. Let's face it, the market's been going up and up and up. And rather than foreclose, people are just going to sell it and grab money. So the foreclosures with hard money, in my opinion, tend to take the same pattern as regular bank foreclosures. We don't have a lot of foreclosures now, right? Although they're saying they're starting to build up a little bit now, but there's not a tremendous amount of foreclosures because values are so high, right? So it's kind of the same, I think it's the same pattern as the market starts to turn. And these people taking the private financing / hard money out, bridge loan, whatever you call it, they have plenty of equity, so they're not going to get foreclosed on. So again, that's a hard, I get your question, what percentage?
10%, 5%?
No, probably
3?
5. It's so hard to, I don't know the percentage, but I know the percentage increases exponentially when the market starts to come down. When that market comes down, if it's 3%, it might go up to 30%. Because now, how do you pay the hard money lender off? You can't sell it. You can't refinance because it doesn't appraise out, and you can't sell it. So your exit strategy is out the window, which is exactly why we do short-term lending. Because within that 1 year period, the market's not going to drop. It's not going to generally drop 20%. If it does, we got major economical problems in the country. So that's what I do. And again, I might extend the note for 6 more months based on, so there's a number of factors based on the borrower and based on the value of the property and the economy.
Okay, how many percentage of borrowers end up getting a bad deal? Or they just get into a home and they're like, oh my God, this is like a nightmare. It's worse than I thought. I need to get out of this and I'm stuck.
I think most of the people that are doing their proper due diligence, and by the way, sometimes hiring the right private lender, for instance, me, I don't want to gloat, but I had a client one time that came to me for a hard money loan. She was buying a property, I think it was in Warwick, and it was in a flood zone. She didn't realize it. And the seller was trying to dump it because when you're in a flood zone, you can only do a percentage of the rehab. Like let's say 50%, right? Well, this seller did 80%, so it was a cease and desist order. This poor buyer said, oh, I'm getting a great deal, I want to go in. So when we went out there, when I sent my person out there, they said they did some due diligence. They realized it was in a flood zone. They realized that it was a cease and desist order. They realized that wasn't a record either, so most buyers wouldn't have known that, right? How else my buyer didn't know it. We found this out. I, as a lender, found it out.
The new buyer would take that on, the cease and desist?
So the problem is that the town, the city of Warwick, I believe it was Warwick, said, no, the person went, I don't think anything was recorded either. I can't quite recall, but the poor buyer was walking into innocently thinking that she's getting a good deal, not realizing, wait, this property's in a flood zone. I can't do what I want to do. I can't rehab 100% of this, Wow. Or sometimes I've had another situation similar to that where they come to me, they want to do the rehab, and we find out it's in a historic zone. I said, oh, really? You want to do this? I said, you realize if you're rehabbing a property that's in a historic zone, it's probably going to cost you double of what you think? Because you can't just rip the casing of the windows off, or, you got to kind of restore that to a certain degree. I don't know exactly what you have to do, but it costs a lot more in a historic zone.
Wow.
So we've found that out as lenders. Personally, I didn't find it. I was the person that does
You send out?
Yeah, I sent out. They do some due diligence to protect me, and it ultimately protects the buyer, the borrower. So the borrowers are happy with me because I saved them, or her.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you've done it for so long.
I've done it for so long.
You have a process in place.
I have a process. Yeah, I've done it for a long, long time. Yeah. Again, I'm not smarter than. I'm just an average person that's just nervous with my money, and I try to dot my I's and cross my T's. Basically, and I'm conservative when it comes to that.
So now, house is fixed up. It's going to be sold. What happens then?
What happens then is once they get it listed and they sell it, and they call me up and they say, "Hey, I sold the property," and I said, "Awesome! Hopefully, you made $1 million." Hopefully, because what they owe me is what they owe me. If they make $1 million, they still owe me X amount of money. If they lose money, they still owe me X amount of money.
Yeah.
So I'm not their partner. I'm just their lender. Like I explained, I have a lot of people that come to me that say, "Glenn, let's partner up in this."
Yeah.
I said, no, I know. Well, you can make a lot more as a partner. I said, I know, but I can lose a lot more as a partner. I don't want that. I'm happy with my basic percentage return. That's my platform. That's what I do, and that's what I'm happy with. So I don't want to be a partner, no offense. To a degree, I'm your partner, but I'm really your lender. Yeah. Here's the terms set forth. Here's what I'm getting, irrespective of whatever you get. So you can go and spend $1 gazillion, and I hope you make $1 million. But if you don't, unfortunately...
But you've seen that. You've seen people make $1 million.
Oh, I've seen people make a lot of money, yeah. I've seen people make money. I've seen
from
people
what they
lose it.
borrowed.
Yeah. No, we've done some rather large deals. Yep. So, I've seen people make money. I've seen people lose money. But you have to do a lot of research, in my opinion, whether it's as a private lender or as an investor, or as a realtor. You have to know values of real estate. That's critical. I don't, quite frankly. I don't. I hire people to do that. I have a rough idea, but I don't know values. I hire people. I hire people like you. That understands the values of real estate. I can't get comps, and I don't have access to that, and I don't have time to do that, even if I did have access.
Yeah.
So
awesome. I think we covered everything. This is great information. I hope it helped.
I hope so.
Some people out there.
And if you have questions, if you have questions, my email is Glenn Glenn at rirealestatelaw.com, rirealestatelaw.com, or my phone number is 401-334-4770.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for
Thank
stopping
you, my
by.
friend. Awesome.
Thank you.
Great questions. Thanks.
Yep.